Ohtani has been doing unprecedented things this season, and now he'll continue that on one of baseball's biggest stages as the two-way star will start on the hill and bat leadoff for the American League team in the 2021 All-Star Game on Tuesday in Colorado. Ohtani showing up for the fans. Here's Dave Roberts.
Well, we did. We wanted him. He didn't.
So did we.
He didn't pick us. So we did, but until you know, you don't. And so to see it kind of play out like it has, we're all fans of baseball, and to see something that really hasn't been done in generations is, where in my opinion, it's the best talent ever in baseball, 1 through 850 or whatever, and for him to be this marquee player, it's remarkable.
High praise from Roberts. We now welcome in ESPN staff writer June Lee for a candid conversation. June, first let me say, I love the fit. I love the flavor. You're bringing First Take. We need that. Thank you so much for being with us and doing this conversation with Stephen A. And Stephen A., I'll let you take it away.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot. And thanks, June, for coming on. They told me that you was going to be on First Take, and then you and I spoke last night, and you can reveal whatever you want about that conversation that you and I had last night. You can choose to pick, you can choose to articulate and expose everything that we talked about to your liking. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to make sure that you and everybody in the Asian American community understood that I was deeply sorry for any kind of feelings that I caused, period. The reality is, as I told you last night on the phone, as a black man, I repeatedly found myself in situations throughout my career where you're trying to tell somebody, excuse me, this is offensive to us. And all they're focused on is what their intent was and how they feel, as opposed to how the offended party feels. And I don't want to be that individual. I'm not Asian. I'm not Asian American. I have no idea how you feel, or actually I didn't until we spoke last night, along with some other folks that I had spoken to, obviously, as this stuff percolated and really, really gained steam. So please take the floor and feel free to express whatever you want to express about what I had to say. And again, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and I wanted to take a moment to explain from the perspective of someone in the AAPI, Asian American community, why there was this reaction yesterday. I think the way that the comments came across and were received by people, by myself personally, by my friends, by my cousin who I talked to on the phone, it was a lot of exacerbating and kind of furthering the narrative of the perpetual foreigner stereotype, which goes into this idea that Asian Americans or Asian people in this country, regardless of what they do, because they come from a culture in the East, there's a cultural gap there that is often hard to bridge because the East and the West just value different things, and there's also the language gap as well. I came to the United States when I was 2 months old. English is my second language. My mom came over here, did not really know how to speak English fluently, so this is something that was incredibly personal to me. And so hearing that on television and hearing someone say that someone needs to learn English in order to be the face of baseball, I feel like it was a topic of a conversation that really hit for me personally. I think hit for a lot of other people in the Asian American community as well, and furthers this idea that regardless of what we do and what we accomplish in this country, that we will never be American. There's this idea that the model minority needs to kind of keep their head down and not speak up about their experience as being American, and I think that dynamic is changing a lot over the course of the last year or so. We've seen the Stop Asian Hate movement. We've seen people on television, news stories, more news coverage about what is happening in the Asian American community, and that is a market change from what I experienced growing up as a Korean American in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts. But the fact that we're even having this conversation on television in the first place, the fact that this is even a controversy, I think speaks to the larger fact that so much of the Western media, American media, us at ESPN are so unprepared to talk about Asian Americans in a nuanced way that speaks authentically to our experience in this country. Some of that falls on us in needing to speak up about what it's like to be Asian American, but it also falls on the institutions, on ESPN, on other media outlets covering the Asian American community to know about the generational history, the generational trauma in this country, the killing of Vincent Chin, the internment camps of Japanese Americans during the course of World War II, and how that affects kind of how we talk about Asian Americans. And we've seen this across the board, in the course of how Asian Americans have been in pop culture, the way that BTS is covered, the way that Jeremy Lin was covered during the Heart of Linsanity. There was an incident that happened here at ESPN where there was an insensitive headline, a racist headline that was put out there, and people are not aware of how that kind of discourse affects the Asian American community. So I wanted to take this opportunity to speak up about how yesterday's discourse and how what you said on television yesterday affected the Asian American community, and how it's on ESPN and on the rest of the media institutions to be able to speak about Asian American community, because this is the reality of our authentic existence in this country.
Well, first of all, I appreciate all of that you just said, and it was a lot there. So let me try to compartmentalize and get to it. And let me say first this. We can't have a discussion about it if I'm not willing to put my ignorance on display.
Absolutely.
See, to me, the problem is that when you have folks that make mistakes, they double down, they try to defend it, and then want to run and don't want to talk about it. See, I want to be able to talk. I want to be able to talk about it, and I want to be able to expose my level of ignorance so you can then piggyback off of that, combat it, and we can knock down some of these barriers that you've alluded to that you guys face as members of the Asian and the Asian American community and beyond. So I want to do that, okay? So I'm coming at you with this, willing to put myself on Front Street just so we can move this conversation forward. And this is not something that ever has to happen to anybody again. I was wrong. It's on me. It's not on ESPN. It's not on Walt Disney. Not on Molly, Max, anybody first. That's me. I said it, okay? Now let's get to this. When I spoke, as I said to Jeff Passan earlier today, the first segment of the show, we're talking about baseball. Ignorantly, I wasn't thinking about any of the things you just mentioned at all. I was thinking about the sport of Major League Baseball is having a problem ingratiating itself with the younger demographic. Unlike the NBA, unlike the NFL, that younger audience is not gravitating towards baseball, which means that baseball's audience is only getting older, which explains why Rob Manfred, the commissioner, and others within the sport of Major League Baseball feel compelled to do something about it. You know, so the multitude of changes, Julie, as you know, covering the sport the way that you do, you know all these changes that they've made. And what I was trying to say, ultimately and ignorantly, is that a guy like Ohtani, because he's a guy that has an interpreter, you know, is that going to successfully go about the business of ingratiating you with the younger audience to promote the sport of baseball? I had no idea until you and so many others explained all the tentacles that statements like I made yesterday had attached to it, and the kind of detrimental effect that had on the Asian and the Asian American community. And that's why I wanted to apologize. And I want to be educated because I want to make sure that not just me, but all of us are capable of recognizing what are the kind of thoughts that permeate through you guys' minds so we can avoid thinking that way, feeling a certain way, acting a certain way that's detriment to your community and basically to all of us, because as far as I'm concerned, we're all a part of the same community. Your thoughts about that? Please take it away.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation on national television right now, I'm hoping is going to help further this discourse and move it forward, because if we deny the fact that Asian Americans have this existence in this country, you're only kind of putting barriers to making, the idealistic idea of this kind of discourse happening in public more difficult to have happen. Now, in regards specifically to the way that Major League Baseball is marketing its players, we saw a generation of young players with Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, MLB really pushing them, two white guys who the sport really pushed out in front, and they didn't really stick. And I think the difference between what happened with Mike Trout and Bryce Harper is that the fans chose Shohei Ohtani as the face of baseball. This is something that's happened organically. And I think it's emblematic of a couple things. Number one, I think it's emblematic of the fact that sports has this power to transcend language for for athletes to be stars even without hearing what they're doing. Just the mere fact of Ohtani's kind of generational, insane talent, doing something that nobody has done in theory since Babe Ruth, is so eye-catching. I feel like it's hard for us as sports consumers to even process what is happening. But I also think it speaks to this general idea that the globalism across the world is continuing to grow. I spoke about BTS earlier. They've shown that they can be a commercial successful group in the United States and across the world without having songs that are in English. And I feel like that ties to this because Shohei Ohtani is not speaking English, and there is a way to market Shohei Ohtani, and this falls on MLB. It falls on Shohei Ohtani's representation. It falls on the media institutions as a whole to market Shohei Ohtani better, despite the fact that he doesn't speak English.
But Joe, excuse me for interrupting, because where I'm going is this. Based on what you just said, do you believe baseball feels that way? Do you believe baseball has shown any evidence that they feel exactly what you just pointed out? Because I'm challenging whether or not that's the case for them. I know what they need to do, because the world has changed. All right. Globally, the world has changed. It's not what it used to be. It's certainly not what it used to be in America. Clearly, you don't have to market a white individual in order to elevate the profile of a sport in this day and age. But do you believe baseball believes that?
I think baseball is starting to get there. I think there was evidence of this at the beginning of the season where if you looked at MLB's Twitter page, one of the front-facing platforms for MLB, their entire banner was a lot of minority players. It was Fernando Tatis Jr., it was Juan Soto, it was Ronald Acuna Jr., it was Mookie Betts. They're starting to realize that what makes baseball different from the rest of the American sports landscape is this cultural diversity, the fact that you have people from different countries. And I think you're seeing this emblematic in the game and the shift in the unwritten rules on the field, the fact that bat flips are now an acceptable thing, that self-expression is now an acceptable thing, that sneaker culture is starting to kind of leak onto the field through the cleats, people wearing Jordans on the field, people wearing painted cleats on the field. You're starting to see this self-expression on the field that you didn't see before, and it's starting to show that baseball has all these cultures come together, right? And I think the baseball clubhouse in many ways is so emblematic in both good ways and bad ways of America as a whole, because you see so much of the kind of cultural diversity and the cultural segregation within the clubhouse reflected in the cultural spirit of America as well in our current moment.
I wanted to ask what you think about this real quick, because a friend of mine who hosts his own radio show on Urban View, Sirius XM Radio, Channel 126, his name is Joe Madison. They call him the Black Eagle. He's been around for a very, very long time. I've known him for years. Love the man. He sent me a quote yesterday. He sent me something. I want to know what your reaction is to this. He said, what do you call someone who speaks, basically, this is a quote that he pulled. What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 1 language? American. That's what he said. That's what he sent me as. And I was like, damn, it is true. And I wanted to know, what do you feel about that quote, and how much do you feel a quote like that impacts the Asian and the Asian American community in terms of how Americans in this day and age view folks who are from a different place than obviously the United States of America, particularly as it pertains to the sport of baseball?
Well, I think we're starting to have a shifting discussion and discourse around what it means to be American in this country, and I think that transcends the idea of sports. When I was growing up, there weren't any Asian Americans other than Pablo Torre and Mina Kimes and Michael Kim on ESPN, and now I'm sitting in this position as a bilingual, non-American born person talking to you guys about what it means to be American, and I also speak multiple languages, and I'm doing it in my technical second language. So I think it's interesting in that I think this is a continuing conversation that Americans as a whole are going to have is, what is this idea of what it means to be American? Why do we have these assumptions of what it means to be American? And what is that idea of what it means to be American going to be as we move forward?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks. And I really, really appreciate the conversation that we had last night, my man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you having this conversation with me.
Yeah,
no problem.
And I just wanted to mention Ohtani, the first player to ever be selected as a position player and a pitcher. And as you astutely mentioned, the fans picked him. So seminal moment right there. It's so nice to have you on, June. And I know I speak for myself, everyone at First Take, ESPN, Disney, we want to be inclusive. We want to continue to have this conversation. So please continue to call us out, because we want to get better and know that you have allies in us here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, guys. When we come back to the association, we go. Big Perk making his return to First Take. Last week, he said the Suns are about to take the league by storm for many years. Max, since